So if you don't know me, I'm John Butterworth, and these are all my paintings from approximately 20 years. It wasn't an easy selection, was that? Angus and I invited Angus to curate the show with me because apart from it's lovely, it's great to have another set of eyes, it's also nice to have a dialogue about painting, and which is something I'm very mindful of not having very often these days. We sort of work in isolation, us painters, and like we all do in our own ways of life, I guess. But anyway, so I invited Angus, who I've worked with in the past in the university art department, if he'd be so good as to work with me on the curation and also the selection and how we put the show together. I'm just coming up to my 60th birthday, and I thought, if I don't mark the occasion, or at least review my life up to this date as an artist, I don't think anybody else is going to. So I thought, right, I'll hire this space. So I thought, in the first instance, it was going to be about turning 60 and just retrospectively look at the work that I've been producing in the round, rather than just a particular type of work, which is usually the way I display it. And then I got to thinking about the title for the show. I just happened to be looking at a painting called Stargazer, and it's a picture it's a portrait of me staring at the sky, basically. Anyway, I was talking to my friend David about the title, and he said that maybe that you should get away from the birthday theme a little bit and talk about the work. And then, of course, as we discussed more what was going to go in the show, the star theme became more significant. And actually I became more mindful of stargazing, because that's something I seem to do a lot of. When Angus and I were looking at all my different work in the studio and how many things I've sort of disowned almost, and we brought them back to light in a way, and actually certain things, like this painting, I never liked this painting, but I liked the picture, I liked the idea of it, but I didn't think I really got it. But actually it sort of made sense in context with this show anyway.
How do you feel the hang has helped or hindered each individual piece?
Yeah.
Do you think it's added something to the work, seeing the figurative painting next to an abstract painting?
Well, it's exciting in the first instance to actually put them together. You don't really continue to review what you've done until you do something like this. Or Angus particularly mentioned it would be good to show my different periods of work together. In other words, the narrative paintings and also the chromatic paintings. And actually, as we started putting them together, there seemed to be a lot of connections. And I've not really adopted that as an idea for showing before. And he said, maybe you should frame them as well. I think that's what he said. And I was photographing some of the work one day with a friend, and I said, "Oh, can you hold on a minute? I just want to put some tape around this image," which I ended up using on the invite. That was my interpretation of what Angus meant by framing. Seeing them together has actually brought a connection, whether it's like, for instance, this painting here, Valerie, with the dreads and the purple dress next to purple painting. There's something that communicates between them for me, which I wouldn't have even looked at previously. It's just light, it's colour, and it's space. This is quite a good example. This is a painting of my mother in the green, and when we put the green wave next to her, they feed off each other as a duality, yeah.
Can you talk us through your main kind of cultural influences?
I mean, other artists, obviously. I mean, I'm particularly, you may have noticed, or if you're aware of Edward Hopper, then obviously you might have picked up on a connection, my interest with shadow, in solar paintings and light. And also travel has informed my work. Well, just being aware of your environment. So a contrast between a winter in England and a winter in Jamaica. So there's quite a lot of influence in the more recent paintings. Whether it's conscious or not, I'm not sure, but it would appear to have infiltrated my colour, my palette in a very sort of life-affirming way, if you might put it that way, colour-wise.
How do you know when they're finished? And how do you know if they're any good?
I seem to have a sense of when they're finished, although they sometimes don't. I sometimes just walk away from them and then don't go back to them. But and other times, probably more with the monochromes. I'm more familiar with that process. So they've almost become an instant painting. You can't really repaint those.
Can you talk us through the process that you go through intellectually of how you make a figurative painting or how you make a monochrome painting? What's the difference in your mindset in terms of subject matter and intent and then content with the finished kind of outputs?
I mean, the immediate thing that springs to mind is the mechanics, so the process. In terms of the content, I don't really feel the content's that different. It's just the way it's made is different. So like the monochrome or the colour field, if you like, paintings, it's much more of a mechanical process that I sort of arrived at through the big painting here. Actually, is quite a good example of where that came from originally. This big painting on the left called Sea Salter, which I see really as a figurative painting. That was the first of the sequence of the monochrome paintings, and that was a hard-won image, if you like. The process that came out of the Sea Salter paintings, what informed all the monochrome paintings. So it was about finding a way of making the painting, but the actual content is very much formed from the process. So the colour's mixed actually on the surface of the painting, and then it's eventually spread. Even though it's quite constructed, it's a structural sort of process, but you don't see that process, you just see the product.
And so in the same way with the figurative paintings, how are they made?
Yeah, well, the figurative paintings are made more objectively, I suppose, with the subject matter is obviously something selected and referred back to. The structure is more identifiable as a subject, but the construction is similar to the abstract paintings in as much as I'm still looking at form, I'm still looking at how the painting comes together and how it feels. I mean, there's obviously certain narratives in some of the paintings which are particular to things in my life. My brother died about 18 years ago, and that was like a life-changing event because, well, it was a bit unexpected, but also the nature of his death was a bit traumatic, to say the least. So after working through trying to mentally figure all that out, I then started gradually getting back to painting about it, and maybe that time out actually gives you space to articulate what the feeling is, and then you can bring that with more clarity maybe to the image. So I suddenly knew I wanted to paint a painting about a falling man, so which is a narrative actually for my brother's death, but I didn't know that was going to happen. You know, I thought I was going to be painting these paintings for the rest of my life when I got to paint that one. For me, this is about living in Whitstable. That's my experience on canvas. When that happened, the narrative changed in me, and I didn't have any choice. You know, it's like, oh well, that's happened. I can't turn back the clock. I can't pretend that I don't feel something. I think that shouldn't be underplayed in terms of the personal aspect of this show for me, because you know we all function differently and respond differently to things, and maybe I could have left that after a year and gone back to that, but actually I've embraced it all.
And do you mind the audience knowing what's the kind of personal history of some of the paintings?
Well, for me, it's quite liberating to be able to talk about it, but I don't think it's something commonly that we do talk about. We tend to be private about what happens personally, but having spoken about it individually with people, I mean, it's quite poignant, and it's emotional, and it touches a chord, or it's like, it sort of makes you catch your breath, or whatever it does. But I think everybody, when you do talk about it, you realise that everybody's got a narrative in their life, particularly at a certain time of life, where you've encountered death, at least, in some shape or form. So you can empathise with that, so on a human level. But I still think of it as a painting, and the interpretation of that, I don't feel that I need them to know that. I think the audience bring their own language to it, or their own sense of what's going on here. But for me, it's about having to make sense of the world, and that's the means to doing it.